Ali. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Jason Lewkowicz, who is a very senior cybersecurity professional at Optiv, one of the most senior people that I've had on the show. And thanks very much, Jason. It's been quite a challenge to get you, with your busy schedule. So I really appreciate that, first and foremost.
Happy to be here, David.
So let's start with maybe just kind of like clean our palate just by maybe just walk me down memory lane what you've done and how you got to your existing role.
Sure. So I have an interesting career path. I actually started at Andersen Consulting in 1997 as a college dropout in the mailroom. Um, Now to wind up as Optiv's Chief Services Officer. So how did I get there? When I joined Andersen Consulting, and the funny story too is when I came home and told my parents that I had been offered a role at Andersen, I thought it was actually the window company, not the consulting conglomerate that became Accenture. I worked in the mailroom for about 15 months, where I straddled between a visitor services kind of a facilities type role as well as my mailroom duties, where it gave me the opportunity to learn technology because the efficiency in the role that I had at the time, I was able to find areas to improve, and which kind of propelled me into really having a knack and a desire to be competitive with myself as a way to continuously improve and get better. Um, I ended up going from obviously our mailroom into our IT department, where I started as a help desk technician and working to define Accenture's original asset management and CMDB process, and eventually left there as a senior desktop engineer, where I was doing workstation configuring, server configuration, networks, etc. I had my first taste of security when Accenture got hit with the Melissa virus in the late 90s. It was still Andersen Consulting at the time, but that got me interested in all the things that could be done with computers for a bad thing versus productivity and informational sharing. So I joined our incident response team, our CERT, in 2003. A few months after, I was asked to lead it. And from there, I kept looking at ways to drive operational efficiencies and add into what the team could do as a way to save money for the organization, as well as to accelerate certain processes. Um, my security tenure at Accenture spanned almost 17 and a half years. Um, I was part of the team that created the information security program. I did time consulting. I stood up our Fed practice in terms of what it is that we do from a response component. And then when the US government released its FOCI, I was given the choice, stay with the federal practice or go back to the mothership, which obviously I went back to the mothership. And in 2020, as the pandemic was ramping up, I had been offered the CISO opportunity at Cognizant, and I was very much chasing title, as my lifelong goal was to be a chief information security officer. So I took that role, and the day before I joined, they publicly announced their Maze breach, which, as you can imagine, an incoming CISO to an organization of $20 billion, 300,000 employees, was quite the undertaking, especially considering it's April of 2020. There's no flying, there's no war room, there is not the typical things that you would have to work through an incident. So that was a fun and challenging time. And uh, about 21 months later, I was given the opportunity to go to Optiv, where I had the ability to go back into consulting and take the 20 plus years experience that I had and bring them to clients. So when I joined Optiv, I started as the SVP over cyber defense and applied security, which was one of three lines of business in their services portfolio. Uh, as the year concluded, I was asked by our board and our CEO to take a look at, are there ways to improve the way that we operate? And I said, actually, I think we should do some consolidation because it would improve the client experience as well as the sales cycles. So January 1st, I was asked to lead all of consulting. And then near the end of the month, I think it was the 26th to be specific, I was asked to be Optiv's Chief Services Officer, where we have been working to improve processes, up-level talent, which doesn't mean let go of people. It means actually identify where we have areas to improve, identify training programs, et cetera. So I've been with Optiv for 16 months. It's an exciting role. Every day presents a new challenge, which I like challenges. And to your point around my schedule, I feel like I have to literally pencil everything in, from wake up to gym to bathroom breaks to lunch. It is a crazy grind. So anybody who's thinking about this role, give me a call. I can give you a few punches in the face to talk you out of it.
Jason, incredible journey. If you don't mind, I'm trying to keep all the questions, straight up in my head. Just first
Sure,
and first, let's kind of double click on the mailroom experience.
sure.
And as you mentioned, it seems like that every role that you've taken, it's almost like building a pyramid, right? So you build a foundation, and then one thing leads to another, and then it gets you to where you are today. But you put the time in. Um, at beginning, and it's amazing because a year and a half is not trivial,
Nope.
and that experience, and it almost sounds almost like a cliche, Jason, to say the least, because it doesn't happen anymore today. It seems like a lot of people just want to jump into a senior role. They just want to, new graduates, people that just did like a boot camp, and maybe you can kind of back me up on this if this is something that you experienced as well.
Yeah. So I'll answer those two questions in turn. So the first one is the experience. So we grew up on the bottom side of middle class, probably on the upper side of poor. Uh, Education wasn't a stress thing in my family, but I was able to identify motivating factors for myself, which was at the time money and material things, which at the time I was working in the mall, making I think $6.50 an hour. So obviously not an opportunity to really generate any kind of meaningful money to buy the material things that I so long to have. Uh, Having a family who was, immigrants to the States, I was the first generation here. It gave me the patience and also the persistence to see something fully through. So what I learned in the mailroom was an appreciation for hard work and back office operations, which I think a lot of people coming out of school is they go directly into a role, even if it's at the bottom of the pyramid. It is not necessarily at the bottom of a corporate function pyramid, which I think provides a different perspective. There were other things that I learned, and one was I think opportunity and right place at right time, which was mentorship. So I am a very people focused individual. I like being around people. And it gave me the opportunity to understand the power of a network, which at the time I didn't, but now I do, which is part of what helped me propel me into these other roles. So as people took an interest in me as an individual, whether they realized it or not, I was getting extreme mentorship. It was like every day was an MBA. One thing I didn't talk about in my story was while I was a college dropout, I of course went back to school and finished my university studies. But I don't think it would have happened had I not had the mentorship, the fostership, the investment from people at Anderson back in the early days, and even through by the time that I departed. I was just very good at identifying who had a skill set that I was interested in that I could learn from, and then reaching out to that individual saying, "Hey, I saw this thing that interested me. Would you be willing to spend time and talk and coach me?" And even in my role at Optiv, I still do that. There are members on our board of directors who have had very high level roles externally to Optiv, obviously, and I meet with them on a monthly basis. I talk about my plans, both personal and professional, and use them as a sounding board. If I'm on the right trajectory and if I think the juice is worth the squeeze in terms of the areas that I'm investing in. Now to the other side of the question, which is individuals who go to a boot camp or come out of university and just expect to get thrown in a leadership role. I do find that more often than not. I think there's a component generationally around entitlement, and so instead of pushing back and being abrasive to it, kind of in a polarized way, I try to talk to the individual about why they feel that they are qualified and justified for that role. And most often it's, well, I went to this university, I took this specific training. And I said, that's great. So on paper, you have the right pieces, but in practice, you don't. So I'll walk them through a series of questions, and every role it's different. So I'm not going to throw any specific ones out there, but I'll walk the individual through some specific set of questions, which will usually lead them to the answer at the conclusion of those questions. They probably aren't qualified to be at the level that they are. And usually those questions come around decisions which they have to make. And immediately I can see that they're not able to make the decision because they don't have the knowledge capital or the historical, I'll say, bruises or scars to be able to make them. And that's where I'll point out, this is a decision that would kind of need to be made ASAP. And the fact that you're, waffling on it and contemplating, you're probably not ready. Not saying that you can't get there, because I think you can get you there, but you're not ready right now.
And I also think that the foundation of doing something tough,
Mm-hmm.
meaning being working at the mall, is not an easy. Get paid a little bit is not an easy task, and I think that it's part of building a foundation of tenacity, you know, perseverance that, again, it's not, you cannot get that just from getting a you know, an office job right away with, like, you know, the nice comfy Herman Miller chair and the nice, you know, ergonomic keyboard and a big screen 4K monitor, right? So a lot of that is the foundation of being successful, is to have that experience. And what would you recommend as an equivalent of the mailroom for somebody who's just starting out or wants to transition into cybersecurity?
Well, so there are lots of, I would say, entry level opportunities within the information security space to get individuals, ready for it. The There's two kind of easy paths in, and I'm going to call them easy, but it doesn't mean that they're actually easy. The first one would be project management. So if you think about the consulting side, if you have project management skills, they are transferable regardless of the type of project that you're on. But if you have a background in project management and you want to get into cybersecurity, start looking for opportunities that you can manage cybersecurity projects. It will give you visibility into all the different domains which make up the information security programs for organizations. Uh, and it will give you a familiarity to terminology and speed, et cetera. So I think the project management path could be an easy vector in. The other could be, if you think about incident response and specifically like e-discovery and investigations, there is a whole component around chain of custody and asset management, which again is somewhat remedial, but it's a role that any organization who has an incident response function likely has or needs. So that could also be another way in. The other is, if you're in an organization and you're part of the IT staff or you're part of the consulting, just like any relationship component, reach out to the individuals who you know are the hiring manager, ask them where they have gaps. I know at Accenture, I used to get inquiries all the time from our CIO group, from our desktop engineers, even from individuals in our different consulting practices wanting to get into my specific groups. And if I had training material to provide them, I would give it to them and say, these are the skills that I'm looking for. This is how I would demonstrate proficiency. And if you can accomplish this as I have a next role open, you would be a viable and likely candidate. I'm very big on promoting from within and identifying, I would say, undiscovered talent. One of the things that Accenture did really well was they partnered with Europe, which is a program in inner cities that looks for kids who perhaps have lost their way. They bring them into this program. The program provides them internships, and we would hire a good portion of those individuals that we would bring in, and they would start in evidence management, basic response type work, and from there flourish and grow. So those
And
would be
you
some.
meant no, it's phenomenal advice, and it's again, it's you know, speaking from experience, it doesn't necessarily have to be even that. Uh, it's whatever role you take. First of all, just say yes. You know, like that Yes movie. Say yes
Yep.
to everything,
Jim Carrey.
and then figure it out as you go. And it's not, it's like university and college, and it's whatever you make of it. So
Yes.
you can either just do the role and just you know, work kind of the rule, and or you can make the most out of it and strive to be more successful. And from a career planning perspective, you mentioned something super interesting, that you kind of were chasing the title. Um, Planning is something that people almost find you know, it's almost is hindsight, it's 2020. Like, people don't necessarily plan their career path. They just, you know, they take one role and then they get offered another role and they end up in a company, and then there's just and they're either get lucky, you know, meaning that they've made the right choice, or they don't, and they end up stagnant in some role. What would you recommend as somebody who was successful in picking up the kind of the right roles, even within the same organization, and picking up the right opportunities to advance itself throughout those this past several years?
I love this question, and it's actually where I usually start my mentorship conversation with individuals who approach me, and it starts with, where do you want to be in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year? And when I ask that question, I'm asking from a few facets, because the first thing is you have to be planned on where it is that you want to end up. You can't just get in the boat and start rowing. You have to say, I want to go to this island or this location or whatever the case may be. So there needs to be a plan of where you want to go. And then the next piece is the milestones in terms of getting there. And the reality is, This could be your career. It could be a weight loss journey. It could be learning a new skill. It doesn't matter. But you can't just sit down at the piano and say, I want to be Beethoven. You have to figure out like what are the steps that you have to do to be musically proficient, proficient in information security at a specific level. So for myself, I was focused on in the beginning level, which tied to compensation. And as I grew in my career, it then pivoted to responsibility. Because what I learned early on was it's great if I just want to make a large salary, but if I'm not in a role that commands it, and the command would be based on the value I provide to the organization, it's not going to come with that salary. So being calculated and identifying where it is that you want to go, I think is a huge piece. So for me, originally it was very specific on levels and accomplishing those level segments at a specific cadence, usually 18 to 24 months. The way that I did it was sitting down with my supervisor at the time and explicitly stating, this is my career goal. Long term, this is the immediate milestone which I need to have. I need to hear from you, career, guidance person, where do I have shortcomings or gaps that I need to fulfill? So as that level opens up, there's no question that I'm the right person for it. And I have found that has proven time and time again, all the way to the role I'm in today, to be one of those pieces that's success, that helps me be, I would say, professionally successful. Other things, and I'm finding this again generationally, there's this expectation that the organization will just pull you along and that somebody will make decisions for you and you will end up where you want to go. And the first piece of advice I give people outside of the, where do you want to go? It's your career. You have to own it. You have to be your own advocate. And if you wait for somebody to do it for you, you're likely going to lose, time. I think everybody's ultimate objective should be the ability to retire as fast as possible. That doesn't mean that you have to stop working, but that means having enough financial assets where if you're unhappy in your role, you can leave. If you want to go and teach at university or teach, do more humanity type work, you can do that because you're not cash strapped in any way. So having those career goals, no matter where you are on your journey, is huge. For me, my number is 55. I would like to be able to be fully retired at 55. Will I retire? No. I want to sit on boards. I want to teach at university, whether it be risk management or different business type classes. That's my next goal. So I'm in the process now of figuring out where I can go for my master's degree, which will allow me to teach it at university. So it never stops.
In the retirement is again, it's the definition of what retirement is, and you have a different definition of what retirement. It's more like, okay, you don't have the existential need to work, but it doesn't mean that you're like stop working. Basically, let me ask you this: do you think sometimes it's the problem is what you don't know, and I mean by that is that a lot of people don't are not really aware of what's available to them from a career path. For IT security, cybersecurity is a very vast area, and there's so many different areas within the space that maybe new graduate or people that are just maybe finished at boot camp are not aware that even exist, and
Sure.
therefore they cannot. When you ask them where they want to be, they don't know where they want to be because they don't know that it's something like that exists. What would you recommend to somebody like that to expose them to kind of the vast area of the business?
So it's funny. I think the internet is actually probably the best place to get education, but I'll provide a few different thoughts. So the first one is if they've gone through a boot camp, they likely had exposure to the 8 domains which make up the CISSP, or if it's an older program, the 10 domains previous to the updated version of the CISP, where they would have some familiarity in terms of what it is that's going on. But my actual recommendation to the individuals coming out of the boot camp is you went into boot camp and you came out with a specific skill set. Go and find an opportunity that's going to allow you to become a master in that specific thing. Create a legacy, identify a new process, do something in that role which shows that you, David, are the best at this specific thing at this specific company. Because at that point, the organization is going to want to identify a new place for you as an individual to go as a way to continue growing. Because if they're a smart organization, they will realize once you hit kind of maximum velocity, if they don't have the next thing to feed you, you're going to go look outside for that next thing. That's human nature. So I think the first thing is pay attention at the beginning of the boot camp because they will likely talk about what are the different domains. they're probably very, very high level, 30,000 feet. The next place I would go is usually the internet. Go and look up, whether it be through LinkedIn to identify the individuals, but whether it be podcasts like we're doing or individuals who just like to go and talk about specific topics and themes, whether it be TED Talks or whatever the case may be, that's another place that I would go to get a broad scope of the opportunities that exist in information security. And then I think for the individual, there's kind of two paths they can take. The first one is, are they looking for a specific type of work experience? So are they looking for Big Four or consulting? Or do they want to go to a more startup opportunity where the compensation in cash could be lower, but the upside could be an equity stake in the organization where they get 1,000 or a few thousand, and I'm making these numbers up, but a few thousand shares as options where their hard work, which progresses that organization to generate cash, could at some point net in either an IPO or an acquisition, which would pay them out handsomely, for that, for their investment. So that's kind of the approach that I would give folks: books, internet, mentorship. Going to any of the different security conferences that are local, whether they be ISACA, ISC, RSA, whatever.
And it's also okay to make the wrong decision, or jump into a role that you don't like, and make the change quickly into something else. And I like what you mentioned specifically at startup, because you have the flexibility not just to earn equity, but also to be exposed to so many different roles, because it's less structured than a larger enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at some point in time, were you always like super confident, or you mentioned that you you were the CISO Cognizant, like right after he got hit by Maze.
Uh-huh.
Did you get up in the morning one day and say, "Oh my God, what did I do? What was what did I get myself into?" Because
Yes.
it's not all fun and games.
Most people don't. Most people have not lived through a large scale incident like that. What helped me and made me successful navigating that specific, I would say, challenge in my career, which lasted for the better part of a half a year, and then the following, what is it, 12 or 13 months post that was kind of focused on recovery and rebuilding. Um, Hang on one second, I'm going to close my door.
It's okay.
Okay, so one of the things that on the confidence topic. So at Accenture, what I had done was built out our incident response program. I had helped clients while I was at Accenture deal with the maze actor and the type of and different types of breaches. So I had a lot of confidence in my ability to navigate a cyber crisis, as it's something that was part of my forte that I had done many times. But there's no question coming into that new role, and I would say any position change that I've had that I would say would be a significant step up in level, imposter complex, of course, sets in. So I'm confident in myself as an individual. I'm confident in my ability to connect with human beings and really understand the problem that they're trying to solve. But I would say it's not uncommon that I will scratch my head from time to time and say, how did I get to here? What makes why do these people believe in me? Especially after a hard day, or where there is a hiccup that happens. You talked about decision making. Any decision, unless there's a loss of life, can typically be unwound, and and the course be recorrected. So I try to explain to individuals, especially as they are on their journey to becoming leaders, go with what your gut is telling you to do. 9 times out of 10, at least for me, I have found that to be the right path. You know instinctively which is the right direction to go. I think where people get wrapped around the axle is when they start second guessing themselves, whether it be on a test at school or a decision in the workplace. When you start second guessing yourself, I always tell individuals, take a step back, take a breath. What's your initial response? And again, even if it's the wrong one, it's likely course correctable.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's a very analytical field, but then as you mentioned, sometimes you have to make a decision using your gut, your microbiome, basically, to help you decide. And
Mm-hmm.
let me switch gears a little bit and ask you about this. So you currently play a significant role in an advisory role, right? So to accelerate cybersecurity programs for clients and services. What do you find is kind of the most challenging today at Optiv for your clients, and what challenges are kind of the mainly facing right now, and how do you, is one of the top leading services and product companies out there, how do you solve these challenges? What would you say like the top one or two?
Well, I see two challenges. The first one for the clients, it's not uncommon for a CIO and a CISO to operate against each other. They often have competing interests. The CIO is oftentimes trying to accelerate and run that part of the organization as a business for the business. What can we do to accelerate? What can we do to be cutting edge, relevant, etc.? And oftentimes, moving at the speed of technology, security is oftentimes playing catch up. So I would say there could be a communication breakdown in those organizations where the CISO and CIO are not communicating effectively about what roadmaps are and what dependencies look like. The other piece is right now with what's going on in the economy and the geopolitical tensions around the world, there is, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we are either in a recession or we're walking upon, the fine line of a recession. And organizations globally are cutting headcount, they're scaling back spend. So you have organizations which have, legacy IT, half implemented solutions. Perhaps they've let go of individuals, and their staffing model isn't to where it needs to be able to protect and support the organization. So those are some of the challenges which I see on which presents its own challenges for an organization like Optiv or anybody who's in the professional services space, because oftentimes if there's a reduction in OpEx or spend on the human capital side, it doesn't just necessarily sit inside, it sits on both sides, their ability to go and fund heads to bring in a third party to support. I think the challenge that I face most often on the Optiv side, engaging with clients, is a misalignment of expectations. So there is, at least in Optiv, we have a variety of different offerings in our managed or as a service. And if I think about our SOC as a service offerings, we have very basic, which is we will respond, detection and response to things that are coming out of your endpoint technology, your SIM, whatever it is that you have come and asked us to support, all the way to we have a Fusion Center offering, which is we drop in, we're managing everything in your environment from engineering to content to accelerating your information security strategy, et cetera. But it's not uncommon where a client may say, in the context of value in this very low offering, I'm not necessarily sure what I get, and I'll say, well, let's have that conversation. What is it you're expecting? Well, I would expect um, weekly status reports of what it is that you're seeing from a strategic perspective and the things that we should be doing. I would expect you to be doing a variety of things that wouldn't be part of the offering. And so a lot of times I'll have to sit down with our sellers and with our clients and kind of bring everybody back together around what is it that they actually subscribed to, and what is the direction that we're on. But it raised an interesting question to myself. I don't want to be just another managed service provider. I want to be a strategic advisor managed service provider. So a lot of it's interesting. A lot of the challenges that may get presented, like the one I described of this misalignment of expectations, I then sit down with my leaders and say, I had this wonderful conversation with this client. They expressed this interest to have these things as part of the service. What does the actual level of effort look like? My intent is to grow our business. I'd love to see it get to $10 billion and us to the IPO, and maybe I can move my 55 to 52. So uh, I'm always looking at ways that we can improve ourselves. But I think the biggest challenge managed service providers are facing right now is there is a cutback on organizational spend, and how do we differentiate ourselves to be able to help the client navigate those challenges and kind of the time that we're faced today. So
Yeah,
those
it's
are the
it's
challenges
super
on both sides.
it's super interesting that you could have said like so many different things about like in technology and products and management. All about communication is key, and it's very much soft skills. It's not so much like the hard skills in terms of like the ability to respond to an incident, but it's more so okay. It's how do we respond and what the expectations in terms of response, which is really interesting. And and as you mentioned, really, you have the ability to influence what's coming next in terms of services and offering. And Optiv is a large organization. It doesn't move on a dime. So if you wanted to create something new and maybe pivot into another area where your clients are coming over and asking you for it, it takes time.
It
And
does.
you have to get you have to get the win, the influence the rest of the organization to buy into this, and then you got to put together a plan, and then you're going to execute, and then you got to figure out, who are the first guinea pigs to run this. It's a very involved process. Talk to me about that, and how do you do that, because you do have responsibility over that.
I do. So the process we use within Optiv is actually not much different than the processes used at the last two organizations that I worked for. So I'm very connected to what's going on in my 1,600 person organization. We've set up a different multitude of pathways where individuals that are, I would say, in the trenches have the ability to float up ideas. And I would say in a given week, I'm probably receiving one idea a day.
Wow.
Most of the ideas tend to be smallish in scale. And what I mean by that is the level of effort to stand up the thing that they're talking about would likely not result in the profitability that makes it worthwhile for an organization of our size. However, I love the idea that I have an organization who is continuously thinking about what our clients need and what it is that we can do to present things to them. But if an idea comes through that is something that is of excitement that I think would be enticing to clients, an example right now is we're working on a whole program around cyber insurance, helping clients navigate it, working with the brokerages, creating a framework. So when an idea comes through that generates interest and we see a pathway to profitability, and we are and I think this is the most important thing, does it solve a problem clients have? Not a problem we believe, not a problem that the marketing engine may have created, but an actual problem that we believe exists. From there, I will go out and talk to my network of people and say, thinking about this, how does this sound? And this goes back to networking and building that, I would say, that fabric of relationships, which is so important to individuals as they grow in their career. Information comes back, yes, this seems like a good idea. From there, we will put together a plan in terms of what is the level of effort to stand it up from a resourcing perspective, both human capital and finances. Is it something that we can do internally? Is it something we do with partners? What do we believe that the revenue stream will look like? What do we believe that the profitability component would be? So I will bring in a number of teams. I'll bring in my pricing team. I'll bring in my FP&A team. I'll bring in my marketing team, to validate, do I have the right approach on the client base that I would want to present this to, and do I have the right? Am I thinking about the right marketing language that we would want to, kind of go to market on? So from there, we pull together this package, and it will be presented to our investment committee, which is where we would usually go to get, funding to build out the thing that we're asking for. If it gets approved from there, it will go into our CTO and CIO, where they will design the blueprint and start working on building. But timeline for most of this, it probably takes anywhere from 6 to 15 months to get a new large offering out the door. And the main reason being, especially for Optiv, we have 39 regions, we have 7 areas, we have 6,000 plus clients. We want to make sure that we are bringing to market not an MVP, like a minimum viable product we want something that is going to make a splash and that's going to really resonate with our clients, whatever that offering is. So we try to launch new offerings. I don't want to say every quarter, but probably three to four a year, and we try to do it on the front side because quarter four tends, the last 3 months of the year tend to be our busiest. And the other piece too is, I would say, driving efficiency and advancement or enhancement in the different offerings we have. So do we want to evolve a platform that something sits on? Do we want to make the platform that it sits on, the API open so a client can ingest the information into their environment? And even changes like that, again, given we're a security company and we want to be as secure in doing whatever it is that we do, those things can take time. I would say the fastest we've been able to make an enhancement out the door was in the 2 month time frame, but they typically average 3 to 6 months, especially if we're doing like a full revision of a thing.
and what about the kind of looking at the Pareto principle, right? So 80% of revenue comes from, from limited type of activities. Is there the opposite where you have to sunset a service
Yeah.
because it was either too costly or just too much of overhead and not enough revenue coming in?
Yes. And so that happens all the time. And it could be because a, so a lot of our offerings will be wrapped around products from the partner community that we work so closely with. If a partner is sunsetting a product, or if we have a product that we are noticing our clients move away from, we have different thresholds that have been set up where, as it's approaching one direction or the other, meaning we want to create an offering around it, or the offering is losing traction because it's not something clients are interested in right now, we'll have those discussions around, is this something we should sunset? And then what we do with the clients who are part of that portfolio, because I don't want to leave them high and dry, we'll sit down with them and explain this, the offering that you're currently consuming is coming to an end. These are 2, 3, 5 things which we could do to move you on to a different offering in the event you don't want to. We'll keep you up and running for, we'll work out whatever the transition period is. But again, back to what I'm trying to provide to our clients, it's really world class customer service. So I don't ever want to put them in a situation where they don't feel that the services that they're getting from us are, truly world class and best of breed.
And you also provide thought leadership, right? So clients come to you and say, "Hey, what are the risks I should like be concerned of right now?" And then I'm assuming that every time there's something up there on the news, for example, AI or quantum computing or anything like, you get phone calls from clients saying, "Hey, Jason, can you give me an idea of should I be worried about this?" And do you have the time with your business schedules to continuously monitor what's out there and then also assess the risk? Is it real? Is it not real? Of course, there's a million different risks, adverse events that can happen. What should we do now? And is that really something you should be worried about and tell your clients about?
So on the advisory front, yes, all of what you described happens on a regular basis. So as a new thing comes in, or a new threat comes in, or a new piece of technology like ChatGPT, we try to, as quickly as possible, get a market opinion out. So whether we do a LinkedIn Live, we host a webinar, we create a white paper, we put something, whatever the case may be, we try to get a market opinion out around what we believe the benefit and the risks are of that thing. Then, of course, there are the clients who want to incorporate that thing into their technology stack, whether they're looking at it from a security perspective, a productivity perspective, whatever, it doesn't matter. But we will have those clients who want to do that, and we will sit down with them and walk through the pros and cons of whatever it is that they're trying to do. Now, here's the funny thing. Oftentimes, clients will come to us with we want to implement this thing. And we will try and have the advisory conversation with them around the pitfalls and challenges that they may see, or how this could be disruptive, or you know whatever it is, the pros and cons. And they don't want the advisement. And we'll get to a point where we may do an implementation of a thing, kind of following their what it is that they're telling us that they want, and a decision was made that we now have to walk back on, and oftentimes they have to walk back on. So it actually ends up coming down to being a coaching conversation with my team. So going back probably 15 minutes in our conversation, we talked about communication. I think that without question, the path to the most successful business is one that has, I would say, the best communication skills. Your ability to articulate outcomes and value and all those, I don't want to call them buzzwords, but the reality of a successful business. And the same thing comes down to, sitting down with a client and explaining when they are perhaps getting into waters that could be dangerous for them, even if it's a decision that they're making, having that difficult conversation, which is, hey, David, I understand this is a thing you want to do based on the vertical that you operate within. These are risks that I foresee. I know you don't want to hear it, but if you'll just give me 15 minutes, let's just talk about it, because I don't want you to be in a situation where you're having to explain to your board or to your executive committee about a decision which was made. And that approach seems to work quite well.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's there's always again coming back to communication. There's always going to be value for that. And let me ask you this: is there a certain, so there are about what 20, 30, 40,000 MSSPs out there in the US and North America. And Optiv is one of the largest, if not the largest out there. Do you find that there's a certain DNA of customers that are more of a fit for Optiv as and potentially some that are better off maybe utilizing some of the smaller kind of either family owned or I think that there's a lot of incidental MSSPs, meaning that there's
Yep.
people out there that were IT managers, cybersecurity managers, and then they ended up like venturing on their own, and then they took ownership over a few customers, and you're nodding your head. So, what's your take on that?
So the answer is yes. There are lots and lots of managed service providers out there. What I have found often when I get involved in talking to clients about managed services, there's the desire for the Ferrari, but the affordability of the Camry. And not that there is anything wrong with either one of those things, but I think it's where I oftentimes sit down and get involved. I talk about what are the outcomes that they're really driving towards. What is it that they want to get out of their managed service provider, and what gap is it that we're fulfilling for them? There are times where I've said to clients, what they're looking for. I don't think that we are necessarily set up for the best success, and perhaps they should go and talk to a specific provider. If it's a provider who I know, I'm happy to, point them in the direction, because again, I like being an advisor to my clients, and I recognize that there's going to be times where I can't provide a client a specific thing that they want, but I would love to send them on the path of where to find it. Again, being that kind of strategic advisor. Um, One of the things that makes Optiv unique, and this comes down to size. We have offerings that kind of fit most of the niches which clients are looking for. So again, in the most basic, I'm looking for content to push into my SIM, the intelligence to be able to respond to what's going on in our environment, and then you Optiv throw across the fence, the items that we need to then escalate or go look at, all the way to a program where we come in and conform entirely to your environment, take your strategic roadmap and accelerate it for you. We've got different offerings that kind of appeal to each client, but there are some that uh, you know want more managed services closer to the IT side of the house, which deviates outside of our core competence. And I'll say, we can provide this to you, but I just want to be transparent. There's going to be some lessons learned along the way, and it's probably going to take us double, maybe even triple the time to really onboard you and be at kind of maximum capacity, maximum velocity working with you. We'll have to learn some of this stuff. If you're willing to be patient with us, I'm all in. But I have found that the clients appreciate that. Some will still say, I like the fact that you're being honest and open, so at least my expectations are managed, and we could talk about what the pathway is to getting us to, that accelerated outcome. And then some say, I appreciate it, Jason, but as your guidance, we will end up going a different direction. But I found in almost every single one of those, they come back asking again for other things because they know that I'm not going to commit us to something that we can't deliver.
And they may have to, as you mentioned, drive the Camry for a little while, because, or they might just end up just taking the bus.
Yep.
And let me ask you this, and I'll wrap up because I know you got to go. I have a couple of questions, and it's funny every time you answer, I have a couple more questions that
Well,
pop up. So I apologize for that. Let me ask you this: so dealing with Optiv as a vendor is it's like a wet dream, right? You're like the illusion that you can just sign up an Optiv and then Optiv will go back to the 6,000 customers and then do all the work for them, and then immediately your revenue will like go like a hockey stick and explode. It's it's not like that. There's a lot involved.
it's
Talk to me a bit about, and again, you're nodding your head, and I love that. So talk to me about that kind of that gist of it and what I just said, and how does anyone like a vendor, even start working with an Optiv, and what does that look like?
So Optiv has different tiers in terms of where we will place our partners, our third parties, our vendors that we work with, where we will do reselling and kind of transacting on their behalf. And it boils down to kind of two elements, which are measurable, which would be kind of the revenue growth of that organization, what their client portfolio looks like, what we are seeing from a selling capability, as well as is this a partner where we have the ability to either go to market jointly with them from a services product perspective, or where we end up being kind of the services arm for that organization. Um, it's not difficult to get into the portfolio of offerings that we have, but moving from being an authorized into a managed and then the tier of managed that you are varies based on those other things. And I'll be honest, and this comes to, that confidence and transparency. This would be a conversation better for Alan, who is our senior vice president, who runs that could actually walk through what the process looks like, because it would be my opinion. Usually, when a new vendor reaches out to me, or if I'm at, like I'll be at RSA next week, and I go and walk the vendor floor, as I identify things, I will say, hey, I'll connect the two. Hey, should go and talk. This is interesting. And when I meet with Alan and his team, I'll explain. I met with vendor X, and I see that they have this new offering and it's pretty interesting. I could see it filling this specific niche. We should have a conversation with them about, is there a services play opportunity, or is there an opportunity that this would be something we would want to sell because, we don't have that tool in our portfolio.
And
But no, it's not super easy.
okay, let me ask you one last question. You uh, despite being so busy, you've decided to pursue certifications, is a testament to your to dedication for this profession specifically. Um, Aside from that, how do you keep current with all the latest technologies and make sure that you're um, knowledgeable and able to always deliver that value? You also sit on boards of companies and so on. How do you make sure that of all of this that you don't kind of you can lose track of what's available to you and have that knowledge base that is so valuable?
So it's I very much believe in continuous learning. So I always tell as I'm going through goal setting with my direct reports, I always tell them I want you to set 3 to 5 goals, one to be personal, with the idea that they are learning a new thing every year. So my new thing this year was I learned how to play paddle tennis. Uh, it was something to keep me active with my local neighborhood friends, but it was a skill I didn't have, and it was something that I wanted to do to remain active and take up Sunday evenings where we could go and watch football, drink beer, and play table tennis. I tell people remain continuous learning because it's important. In the context of the role, there's a few ways. So again, the internet. There are a few different, podcasts that I will watch that pop up in LinkedIn, or that, just from different YouTube followers that I'll, sit down and watch. And the interesting thing is I'll do it with my kids, because I want them to understand what it is that dad does for a living. But I also want to open their mind up to how technology is advancing things, and to have a desire to continuously learn beyond the formal education, beyond grade 16 or 18 if they go on for their MBAs. The other piece is I listen to my teams. Being a leader, the one skill that you must have is be an active and good listener. So as my teams are talking about the things which they are doing for clients, and as I sit down with partners, and I attend EBCs and QBRs with my business and with that 450 partner portfolio, I like to go to those because I can sit down and I can hear about the roadmap, and I ask them tons of questions. What problem are you solving? How does this differentiate from this product? Whatever the questions are, but it keeps me sharp around what is a buzzword, what are actual challenges clients have, how are we moving the needle um, for them, and that's kind of how I keep my skills sharp.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I love podcasting, and this is what we're doing now as part of my continuous education. And I love having these conversations with people like
Sure.
yourself that are leading the path. Jason, what's the easiest way for people to reach out to learn more about what you do, about Optiv, and in general? What's the easiest way?
Probably LinkedIn. If folks are watching this, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get me. I do tend, and I'll apologize for this, I get overwhelmed in LinkedIn in the messaging. I do eventually get back to most people, but sometimes it can be a few days, maybe even a few weeks, depending on my travel schedule. But that's probably the easiest and quickest way to reach me.
Yeah, I agree. Just be patient with Jason. He's got a lot on his plate, so a testament to that. Uh, Thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today. It was very valuable for those who listen. Thank you very much for joining me. And until then, be safe online as well as offline. I'll see you at the next episode. Thank you all. Thanks for Jason for joining.